New boss mobs and then fires admin. Major systems go downhill and boss is in hot water. This story happened about a year ago, and I have a new job now. Still, I made a throwaway account to protect the people involved. Mostly, I made it to protect myself. If my former boss burns in hell because of this, well, I'm okay with that, and at least he'll be able to afford the heating bill. I worked for a multinational company for over a decade as a system administrator. My responsibility was in manufacturing, mostly for central systems that manage data flow between manufacturing systems and the ERP system in near real time. Even though the company had lots of cash for stupid projects, the IT budget was always tight for expensive, customized data systems. Shortly after starting, I began implementing my own system, since I'm also an experienced software developer. That was one reason my original boss hired me. I decided to make the system web-based for easier deployment of updates. It worked great, and over time, more functions got ported into this easy-to-enhance, easy-to-update system. There were new features and decades-old software replacements. After about 10 years, this system became central to the manufacturing process in many ways, complete with hot standby servers and multiple daily backups. Due to budget constraints, I was allowed to use open-source software for my database. I was also allowed to use my own open-source web system as the base, keeping it open source except for a few company-specific parts. I liked this arrangement because, essentially, the company was paying me to progress my open-source project while getting a friendly, reliable system to use at work. I always had the support of my various bosses over the years. Middle management changed a lot. Then came a new boss. In our first conversation, he complained that the software was written in a particular programming language because it was so outdated. I told him it's actively developed and used by many Fortune 500 companies for back-end and front-end systems. He wasn't happy. He also asked how I handled the paperwork and how my former bosses managed the project. I told him I did everything by email, so everything is archived on the mail server as required by law. My former bosses didn't manage the project because users and department leaders were happy with how I handled it myself. He was livid. A few weeks later, my boss accused me of running my work like a separate company within our company and said it had to stop. It didn't matter if the whole company approved of my work and spoke highly of me. I had to do much more pointless paperwork, get approval for every small change or bug fix from 2 people, and he was generally difficult about my work. He also loudly complained that I worked alone and was trying to ruin the company by doing so. I have it on file that I asked every month for 10 years to have someone as backup, and was denied every time. You have to understand, I have Asperger's, and I'm generally not good at dealing with this stuff. But so far, I always managed. This day was the first time in nearly 25 years of work that I left early, crying my eyes out. More bullying followed. Over the next year, my boss took away all of my duties, one by one. This meant I didn't always make my 40-plus work hours per week. You can only read Reddit so much before you start going insane. Now, after everything is over, I realized that was his main tactic to get me fired for not working as long as my coworkers. But it didn't click with me at the time because nothing like that had ever happened to me before. My boss forced me to train a backup near the end of February. I only had 1 day to train him. He was very young and inexperienced, and I complained to my boss that there was over a decade of software development, plus knowledge about company rules and processes he didn't have. Also, he didn't know the programming language. The next day, after attending an expensive 1-hour training course and having lunch, HR called me in and told me it was my last day of work. I didn't have the usual 90-day notice period. This was unusual in my country and only legal if both parties agree. I agreed because I got a nice severance package and unemployment benefits starting the next day. I didn't mention to HR that I was planning to quit the next month anyway because of the constant bullying. I had 1 hour to clean out my desk and say goodbye to my coworkers. The last thing I did was have one of my backup delete my accounts as per company policy while I watched. This included my admin account in the web system. Then I left. I went home, cut all company access to my privately owned public source code management temporarily, then worked through the weekend to fork my own project under a new name. I renamed all the classes and stuff, then released it back on my source code management under the new name. This was just so the company would have a hard time implementing all the bug fixes and security updates I do in the future. What I accidentally on purpose forgot to mention was that all system documentation for the web system was also stored on the system. It was linked to the user account of whoever wrote it, me, in this case. On delete restrict was active, so deleting a user account with active documentation was not allowed. But there was also a safety in the software that prevented deleting admin accounts through the interface. My coworker happily typed the required command into the database shell directly. You know, something like delete from users where username equals the Asperger admin cascade. And it worked. Normal procedure would be to assign a different user to that documentation first. But I was fired, and it was the responsibility of the person doing the work, not mine. This was well documented in the documentation he just deleted, as well as in an email I sent out a couple of months earlier. A week passed, and then messages started flooding in. We used a well-known messaging app for real-time communication, and also started using it for private messaging since my group are still good friends. Parts of the system weren't doing their job. Parts of the manufacturing process ground to a halt in multiple production plants. The documentation was nowhere to be found, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong. From what I gathered after I left, they realized I had a second account on the system. It was marked, developer account, don't change without talking to the Asperger admin first. Backup deleted it, since I wasn't working at the company anymore. This also deleted a number of critical maintenance tasks running under that developer/system account. And the system went belly up. Chaos ensued. Emergency meetings were held. The company always held meetings instead of working to fix problems, whenever something went wrong. That is when they started contacting me. Backup messaged me, "You need to come in and fix the problem right away. Company Central is on the phone and they are going ape." He added lots of details about the problem and the company's situation. I replied, "Sorry bro, I don't work for the company anymore." Backup said, "But it's your system." I said it was my system, past tense. "I got fired last week, remember? I do not work there anymore." Backup said, "But we are in trouble." I said, "First, since I don't work there anymore, you just violated company policy by telling me all that stuff. Could get you fired for that, but I'm not going to. You're the somewhat innocent bystander in this." I added, "Secondly, on the day I was fired, HR told me they wanted to get me out the door right away because a disgruntled worker with my kind of system knowledge is a security nightmare." Backup asked, "But you aren't disgruntled, are you?" I played it safe and said, "No, but there's no way for you or management to be sure. Are you willing to take full responsibility if you let me in and I hack your systems?" Backup said, "No, boss isn't paying me that well, you see." I said, "Then third, if I help you in any way, shape, or form, I might be in deep trouble." Backup said, "What?" I said, "See, the company can't sue their own employees if something goes wrong by accident. Suppliers have similar contracts and are insured. I'm neither of those, and if I do something wrong or the company just claims I did even if I didn't, I'm suddenly in deep financial trouble. I just can't take the risk." Backup said, "What if we hire you as an external supplier or contractor?" I said, "I'd have to open a company, get insurance, negotiate with your purchasing department to get on your suppliers list, then write an offer signed by 4 people. That would take 2 to 4 months. Then I'd have to wait another 3 to 4 months for payment. Sorry, I decline." Backup pleaded, "Please help. Me and my boss are in very hot water. What can we do?" I said, "Sorry, I can't help the company because it would be a risk to me. And it would be against your own company policy to allow me to help." Backup said, "Pretty please." I said, "Tell you what. Call Company Central yourself, don't go through your boss, and tell them exactly what happened. Tell them you broke the system by deleting those user accounts on your boss's order, and tell them you didn't know what would happen because you didn't have enough training or experience. You just relied on your boss's orders." It turns out Backup actually did call Company Central a few days later. Boss went through hell, got fired, and was blacklisted from ever being hired again anywhere in this company. This was for another expensive stunt he pulled, which the company realized shortly after he was kicked out. How do I know? I still have lots of friends at that company and hear things through the grapevine. Backup still has his job, but a new, even more incompetent boss. So Backup is ready to find a new job. Yesterday, he asked me about planning his exit from the company. That reminded me that I wanted to write this post, and here we are.